Well, good morning and welcome to Saturday, the seventh day of our study entitled 8 Days That Changed the World. Every day this week we have looked at what was going on in the life of Jesus during this last period of time in his earthly life and ministry. Tomorrow would be the last day of that. There won't be one of these devotional studies at 8 o'clock in the morning. If the weather cooperates, we're going to do our sunrise drive-in worship service at 6:30 on Easter Sunday morning. And then, of course, at 11 o'clock, we'll live stream our worship service as we've been doing the last few weeks. I've said all along in this study that all of these days are important. All of these 8 days that we have looked at as we have walked through each one of them. There's something important happening on each of these days. But there are 2 days out of these 8 that obviously captures more of our attention, logically, reasonably so. Of course, those 2 days are Friday, the day of the crucifixion, and Sunday, tomorrow, the day of the resurrection. And we give more attention and more emphasis on those 2 days than we do the other days of this 8-day period. And that stands to reason. Those are the two most important days. Those events that happen on those days have more significance. But sandwiched in between Friday and Sunday is this day that I'm calling the forgotten day. Saturday, what happened? What was going on Saturday of that day? Friday, the crucifixion, Sunday, the resurrection, but what about this forgotten day? There's not a lot written about what happened on Saturday. We do have a biblical record of something that happened, and we'll look at that in just a little bit, but it doesn't receive a lot of attention. And if you think about it, that's kind of the way it is in our Christian life as we celebrate this 8-day period. We do something special usually on Friday. We have a Good Friday service or some type of commemoration of the crucifixion, and we give attention to Friday. And of course, we have a big celebration on Sunday, Resurrection Day. But for most of us, Saturday is just another day as far as our faith is concerned, as far as it involves Jesus. We're usually busy. We're preparing for Sunday. We're cleaning the house, or we're doing other kind of work, or we're cooking, and we're preparing for the next day. But something happened that was pretty important on this Saturday, this forgotten day. And I want to share that with you and let you see the significance of that. Let me read about it from Matthew chapter 27. And you pay attention as I read, and then let me make some comments about that. This is beginning in verse 62. It says, on the next day, that would be today, Saturday, the day after the preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together with Pilate, and they said, Sir, we remember that when he was still alive, that deceiver, Jesus, said, after 3 days I am to rise again. Therefore give orders for the grave to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal him away and say to the people, he is risen from the dead. And the last deception will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, you have a guard, go and make it as secure as you know how. And they went and made the grave secure, and along with the guard they set a seal on the stone. Now this is very interesting, and it seems kind of insignificant until you think about it a little bit. Basically, here we have the chief priest and the Pharisees coming to Pilate and demanding that he take some action. Now, it's interesting that these two groups of people would be together in any context. They were opposed to one another theologically and politically, and the only time we see in Scripture of them banding together was when they were opposing Jesus. And so here they are again, forming this group, coming to Pilate and saying to him, we need for you to put a guard and a seal on the stone at the tomb. Otherwise, his disciples might come and steal his body away. Really what they were saying was they were afraid of a resurrection. Not really a resurrection. They didn't believe that, but they were afraid that the appearance of a resurrection would be put out there for all the people to believe. And they said to Pilate, you know, if that happens, the second deception, the resurrection deception, would be worse than the first. The idea that he was the Messiah all along. It's bad enough that people believe that, but what if they believed that he really was raised from the dead? You see, they paid attention to what Jesus said during his earthly ministry. They remembered the 3 or 4 times when Jesus said to his disciples and to the people, that I'm going to be arrested, I'm going to be tried, I'm going to be executed, but in 3 days I'll rise again. And the Pharisees and the chief priests, they remembered that Jesus had said that. And so they wanted to squash any possibility of that happening. And so they said to Pilate, look, we got to do something here. Put a guard, put a seal on the stone so that that doesn't happen. And Pilate was still very much intimidated by the Jewish authorities. He was afraid they would cause trouble for him with Caesar. And so he gave in to their demands, and he posted a guard there, and he put a seal, the Roman seal, on the stone. Now, as I said, that might seem insignificant, but in actuality, it would turn out to be very, very important. It would be a crucial thing that they did. And here's why. After the resurrection happened, Jesus' followers, they clung to that truth of the resurrection. They based their whole hope and their whole faith on the resurrection. And the disciples, the apostles, everywhere they went and every time they preached, they talked about one thing. They talked about the resurrection. And one of the strongest evidences for the resurrection actually happened on the forgotten day. And here's what I mean by that. Imagine, if you will, the disciples preaching about the resurrection, and people begin to start raising objections to that. Imagine his other followers talking with their friends about Jesus being raised from the dead, and they begin to object to that. And one of the alternative theories of what happened on that day at the resurrection was that his disciples had stolen his body, hid it away, and made it appear as though he had been resurrected. And so as they went through the next part of their life, they heard those questions and they heard those accusations. Well, here's how they answered that. Here's why we know that's not a plausible idea. For one thing, the disciples never believed that Jesus was going to be raised again anyway. He said it and they heard it, but they never really believed that. They didn't gather at the tomb on Sunday to wait for Jesus to walk out of that grave, right? If they had really believed Jesus was going to be raised on the third day, surely they would have been there. And so then, watch this, why would they fake something that they never believed would happen in the first place? And so the whole idea of steal the body and fake the resurrection, for that reason, not very believable. But here's the reason why it really wasn't believable. And that's the fact of the guards that was posted and the Roman seal that was there on that tomb. When Pilate posted those guards, that carried the full force and weight of the entire Roman Empire and the military strength of the Roman Empire. Had anyone decided to tamper with that grave, they would have faced severe consequences. And that's if they could have even gotten past the guards that were there, right? We're talking some serious, serious guards, some serious muscle. It was highly unlikely that anybody could have got past those guards physically. And then there was this seal that carried with it the weight of the Roman Empire. It was highly unlikely that happened. As a matter of fact, after the resurrection, the officials bribed those Roman soldiers to say that someone had stolen his body, even though they knew that it happened. Now, why would they need to bribe them if they believed that someone had stolen his body? Well, they wouldn't have. And so what you have here is proof of the resurrection, right? You have proof of the resurrection. The significance of something that happened on the forgotten day is very, very strong. In forcing Pilate to do what he did with the guard, the chief priests and the Pharisees actually provided some of the strongest proof there was of the fact of the resurrection. Whenever anybody would say, well, here's an alternative explanation. His disciples, his followers must have stolen the body. They said, no, that was impossible. There's no way that could have happened. And so what the Jewish officials thought would weaken Jesus' claims and shut down his followers and quieten the preaching of the apostles actually made all of that even stronger and louder. And so their self-serving desire to do all that actually provided rock-solid proof of the resurrection. And here's what that says to me. God's sovereignty rules over all. God used even those Jewish officials who were opposed to everything about Jesus to end up providing solid evidence that the resurrection really, really happened. That's an amazing thing. It's an amazing God that we serve, who uses not only those of us who love and follow him and cooperate with him, he can even use those who are opposed to him to accomplish his purpose. This morning on Saturday of this 8 days that changed the world, I am so thankful for God's sovereignty that he can use those that even don't realize they're being used to accomplish his purpose. Well, again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us the rest of the week. We've had some very good feedback from this study, and I just hope that the rest of this day you'll take and think about these 8 days that changed the world.